You might have seen a clip of this floating around online, a handshake, a quiet confirmation on camera, and then boom, this absolutely wild number started getting attached to a single company, MicroStrategy. Today we're going to unpack the math, the huge assumptions, and really the sheer audacity behind this multi-trillion-dollar idea.
So let's just put the number out there, $10.5 trillion. We're not talking about the GDP of a country or an entire industry. This is the potential future market cap for one company. It sounds impossible, right? Almost like a made-up number. So how in the world did anyone get here?
Well, it all blew up because of this one moment. See, in an interview with Patrick Bet-David, MicroStrategy's own Michael Saylor was walked through the calculation, and his response wasn't to laugh it off. It was just this simple, quiet confirmation. Yeah, I guess with that math. And that's what turned this crazy thought experiment into a thesis that people started taking seriously.
That scene itself was just pure financial theater. That's why we're calling this section the 10.5 trillion handshake. It all came down to that moment. You had Patrick Bet-David sitting there with this giant old-school desktop calculator, deliberately punching in the numbers, click, click, click. You could feel the tension, because everyone in the room knew the final number was going to be colossal.
Okay, so the calculation itself actually starts with a pretty simple input, MicroStrategy's market cap at the time. It was floating around $73 billion. This is our baseline, the starting block for this incredible sprint. And this is the secret sauce. This is the engine that powers the entire prediction. A 144 times multiplier. This is the growth factor that's supposed to take us from a really successful company today to a global financial behemoth tomorrow.
The actual math is, well, it's shockingly simple. You just take that $73 billion market cap, you multiply it by 144, and bang, you land right on $10.5 trillion, the exact number Saylor nodded along to. It's so straightforward, but what it implies, that's anything but simple.
So, a number this massive? What does it even mean? It's really hard to wrap your head around on its own. To really get a feel for the scale of this prediction, we have to stack it up against the biggest players in the world right now. Okay, now look at this. This slide is where it gets absolutely wild. Just take the two biggest companies on the entire planet today, Apple and Microsoft, and add their market caps together. You get somewhere around $7 trillion. This thesis projects MicroStrategy becoming way bigger than both of them combined. It's not just a successful outcome, it's a total reordering of the financial universe.
So this all brings us to the most important question, right? The trillion-dollar question, I guess. Where in the world did this staggering 144x multiplier even come from? It's not just a random number they picked. So in this next part, let's decode the 144x.
And the key to this whole thing, as you might have guessed, has pretty much nothing to do with MicroStrategy's actual software business. It's all about the asset they've famously piled onto their balance sheet, Bitcoin. This 144x factor depends entirely on a vision where Bitcoin becomes the primary store of value for the entire globe.
And here's exactly how they cooked up that multiplier. The math assumes that one day, a single Bitcoin will be worth $13 million. So you take that massive number, you divide it by the starting price they used in the interview, which was around $90,000, and what do you get? Our magic number, 144. So MSTR's growth is tied directly to that Bitcoin forecast.
Okay, a $13 million Bitcoin. That sounds pretty insane, right? But that number wasn't just pulled out of thin air. It actually came directly from Michael Saylor himself during his keynote speech at the Bitcoin 2024 conference. In that speech, Saylor laid out 3 possible futures for Bitcoin's price, all by the year 2045. He had a bear case of $3 million a coin, a wild bull case of $49 million, and then right there in the middle, his base case, $13 million per coin.
And listen, this is a really important detail. The whole $10.5 trillion model isn't built on his most optimistic pie-in-the-sky scenario. It's anchored to what he presented as his most probable, most grounded estimate. And honestly, that gives the whole idea a lot more weight.
Okay, so this brings us to the elephant in the room. The question that you're probably all thinking right now. If this entire thing just hinges on Bitcoin going up 144 times, why wouldn't you just buy Bitcoin directly? Why even bother with MicroStrategy?
Well, the answer comes down to how MSTR stock is valued. It doesn't just track the price of Bitcoin one for one. In fact, it often trades at a pretty big premium to its net asset value, or NAV.
Basically, that just means investors are willing to pay extra for the stock compared to the raw value of the Bitcoin it actually holds.
So why would anyone pay extra? Well, it's all about Saylor's strategy. He uses all the tools of corporate finance, like issuing debt and new stock, to constantly acquire more and more Bitcoin. It creates leverage. The core bet is that if Bitcoin is going to soak up trillions of dollars from gold, real estate, and bonds, then using leverage to get your hands on it now is the best way to supercharge future returns.
But you gotta know, there is a major risk here, and that word is dilution. Every time the company issues new stock, existing shareholders own a slightly smaller piece of the pie. The counterargument, though, the whole thesis, is that Bitcoin's growth is going to be so massive, so powerful, that it just completely dwarfs the effect of dilution. It's a bet that the pie grows so fast that your smaller slice is still worth way, way more.
All right, so we've got the math, we know where the assumptions came from, and we have the core strategy. So what's the actual game plan here? Let's look at the final verdict from the source material.
First off, and this is crucial, you have to remember the timeline. This is a 21-year prediction, aiming for 2045. This is a generational hold, not a short-term trade. It's also based on this idea of an S-curve adoption, where a new technology starts slow, then hits this explosive growth phase, and then levels off. So the path there isn't going to be a straight line. And that S-curve model, it actually predicts that after this slow start, there's going to be a period of just insane, almost vertical growth. The analysis specifically calls out the next decade as the wild 2030s, the time when the most violent price jumps are expected to happen, long before we even get to that 2045 target.
So when you pull it all together, the strategic verdict from the source material is crystal clear. It's classified as a strong buy and hold. The recommendation is for a 10 to 20-year time horizon with a strategy of just accumulating more stock on any dips and always using that 144x multiplier as your North Star for the long term.
And so that leaves us with the ultimate question. Is this a deeply researched, visionary roadmap to one of the greatest wealth creation events in financial history? Or is it just a multi-trillion-dollar fantasy built on a chain of incredibly audacious assumptions? The math is there, the confirmation is on the record, and now the rest is for the next 2 decades to prove.